Oh, good morning. Welcome back to the garden. We were out here. It's a balmy, like 88 degrees at 7:30 in the morning. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about one of my gardening tricks that I like to use midsummer. We are here now. It is the 1st of July, 2025. And as you see, a lot of stuff in the garden is doing extremely well. But with this intense heat and the humidity, especially here in the DC region, in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic, let's say, I like to use something that, everybody has their opinion on, but I like to do a midsummer fertilizing. What I use for that is something very generic. It is a 3-4-4 as far as NP and K. So Garden Tone, you can find it at all the big box stores. You can, wherever, Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot or whoever, they have it. A lot of garden centers have it, but I like to use it simply because midsummer, your plants can start to get stressed. You start to get a little bit of fruit, and, the heat, the humidity, everything kicks in. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you exactly how I apply it, how I use it, and why. All right, so we're here at one of the community beds. I have my Garden Tone ready. And what I like to do is just simply we have some squash right here, and just kind of sprinkle it, some peppers here, kind of just sprinkle it right around the base. You don't have to give it too much, but a nice, more than a pinch. I like to put it right around the base of all these plants. Put it in there. Then we'll do a little more under these tomatoes. And then simply, because this Garden Tone, herb and vegetable food, it claims it has all these different nutrients. You can look at the back here and just look, it says mix 3 pounds or 9 cups of Garden Tone per 50 square feet. I just use a handful or 2 around the base of each plant. And then all I'm going to do, we have some beautiful, beautiful tomatoes coming in. All I'm going to do is just take my garden hose and then just water this in. All right, so we have all the fertilizer down. And all I want to do is I want to get in here. I like using the shower setting on this wand. And the shower setting, as you see, you want to give it a nice deep soak. Let me fix this nozzle here. And then as I water, I just kind of like to just mix it around. Give everything a nice good soaking. Get that fertilizer down into the soil. Because I always like, when I water, I always like to have a deep soak. Because it's kind of strange, but a lot of gardeners will know this. When you actually water, a lot of it stays at the surface. You'd be surprised. Especially when you start to transplant in the early summer or late spring. And, you might have just had a big rain, or you might have just watered that morning, and then you go dig a hole in the ground 6 or 8 inches into the soil, and it's dry as a bone. So trying to deep soak, as I'm doing here, I'll probably go back and forth 10 or 20 times on each plant. I've also heard some people trying to figure out how much water do they actually need. Well, a great trick to that is if you just get a 5-gallon bucket or a 1-gallon bucket, turn your garden hose on and count how many seconds does it take to fill up that gallon or 5-gallon bucket. Well, that's going to help you determine how long you want to run your garden hose on the individual vegetables in your bed or in your garden. So let's say it takes 10 or 20 seconds to fill up a gallon. Well, you know that you're probably going to need to stand there and douse your plants for, you know, at least 20 seconds to get a gallon, or, you know, a solid minute or two on each plant, or maybe even more if you want 5 gallons of water, however you determine the right amount of water. One thing I will note here, I try to water consistently for 2 reasons. One, I can never predict the weather, so I'm never sure how much water we're getting, even if I check the rain gauge. And then for 2, I also don't know whether it rains or not, so I try to remain consistent on my watering. So I moved on, did the same thing back here. I'm back in this long community bed now, doing the same thing. I sprinkled that garden cone fertilizer around everything. As you can see, tomatoes are really prolific back here. So I'm just deep soaking this water in to get that fertilizer down into those roots. Some people will say that if you fertilize, you know, midsummer, you could potentially burn the plant. My theory is once they start bearing fruit, you don't really have to fertilize, but because it's been so humid and hot here, my theory is if I can get that fertilizer deep down in the soil, so once I spread it around, I was careful not to get it on the leaves and just get it into the base of the plant, and then just a heavy water. It'll get those nutrients from that fertilizer down into the roots, and it does not scorch the plant, doesn't shock the plant. But if you noticed, the NP and K on that garden cone is pretty low. As far as, you know, it's not a 5-5-5, it's not a 12-2-2 where you could potentially just be promoting a whole bunch of nitrogen and then just a whole bunch of leafy greens and no tomatoes. So because we already have fruit, I've done this for years. Some would agree, some would disagree, but it definitely works in my climate here in zone 7, and I'm careful not to use a very high NP and K. It's just a fertilizer boost. So with that being said, guys, I really appreciate you guys chiming in. I'm gonna get back over here, get these cucumbers done, these other tomato plants done. And if you would, I always forget to ask, but if you would, if this content is good information, or if you just like following along in my journey here in the community garden, please give me a thumbs up, like the content, subscribe if you want. Every time I post new content, you'll get alerted of that. And then you can watch it at your own pleasure, or for purposes of this video, somewhat of a tutorial on what works for me in my zone 7 climate. So with that being said, guys, I'm gonna sign off for now, and I'll see you on the next one.